Welcome to the Stream of Art podcast. Join me, Robyn,
and me, Michelle, as we chat openly about personal growth, creativity, and building a career in the arts. So, Robyn, how has your last week been?
I feel like we should
on the art front.
I feel like we should start with you because you have like fun stuff. You have fun stuff to share.
Yeah. Okay. Is it kind of like an open face sandwich? You know, like when you're delivering bad news and you're supposed to do like good news, bad news, good news. Yeah. But it's just like
so we need to start with
good
you.
News, bad news.
Yeah. Start with you. Go to me. Then go back to you. Good news, my news, then your happy news again.
Okay, well, yeah, on the music front, I have a bunch of new students, which is super exciting. So I moved back to Ottawa in July from Kingston, where I was living for about 9 years, and I hadn't really taken on any new students since I moved here. I think just because I was trying to do the online thing, which I still do. I still do online teaching, but I thought, I'd actually really like to get back into doing in-person lessons again. I really just feel like it's the next thing I need. And so I've just got an influx of new students over the last week, and it's just been super exciting. It's been really fun to, meet new people with sort of new goals and new challenges, and I feel like it's really going to stretch my ability as an educator, and it's just really fun. Sometimes I forget how much I love teaching because it's something I've been doing for such a long time, but then something happens and like this where I just get a bunch of new students, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's really fun to share music with people and to just help be a part of their journey. So yeah, I'm really excited. I'm really excited about, the prospect of just having, just an influx of new musicians to connect with. And, I'm thinking about the possibility too of, connecting with musicians in general in Ottawa beyond, people I'm wanting to teach, just, finding other people to connect with. I think it's something I've been missing, I spend a lot of time on my own just by nature of the work I do. Yeah. Most of my interactions come, when I have a student or, when you and I talk and then obviously like some family and friends and stuff. But, for the most part, I spend a lot of time alone. But I think, the power of art comes from it being collaborative. Yeah. And I'm really thinking in those terms. I mean, that's, we talked about that with starting this podcast. Like, it's fun to do stuff with other people, because I think it elevates what you do. And yeah, so it's just got me thinking about, wanting to collaborate with musicians just in general. So I'm really excited about that. Besides that, I'm feeling quite prolific right now with my songwriting. I've been writing music for what will eventually be my debut full-length album. And I wrote a song in September that I love, super excited about. But I had actually had an idea back in August. It was just like a little seed. It was a vocal melody for a chorus. And I spent a little bit of time, finding chords for it. And I'd kind of recorded a project in Ableton. So I had something kind of started, but I kind of put it aside, and I've come back to it. And I'm fleshing it out, and I'm super excited about it.
Oh,
so
awesome.
I just feel like on the songwriting front, I feel like I've got like another win, which sometimes, for anybody who's created something, when you make something you're really happy with, sometimes it makes it really challenging to create something after the fact, because you feel like all this pressure to do something that measures up to the thing you just created that you love. And so often I can feel after I've written a song that I really love that whatever comes next tends to fall a little bit short. But in this case, I'm really happy with this one. I don't think it's quite as good as the other one I wrote before. I'll say that much. But it feels really nice to sort of be in this creative flow where I'm excited to sit down every day. It's the kind of song too where I wake up in the middle of the night and it's immediately playing in my head.
Oh,
I'm just
cool.
I just wish I could get up and just work on it. So that's also going pretty well for me.
It's kind of fun how like it's nice how good things kind of seem to happen like in chunks. It's like, you got those new students, and like that would have been, I imagine, would have been like a really positive, validating thing. I mean, I know I would feel extremely validated if it's like, what, you want to learn from me, really? And then the fact that like, like that kind of just puts you in that sort of positive vibe, and then that creativity stuff can kind of kick in, and that's exciting. It's nice to see you in this space, because that is definitely not the space I'm in right now, but it's nice to see someone else in it. And I love like what you're saying too about the teaching has kind of reminded you like, yeah, I want to like connect with more people who are also doing this stuff. And I think when we're working solo on our stuff, as we often are doing, we can kind of forget like other people who are doing similar work can actually really do a lot to light you up and to motivate you and inspire you. So that's pretty cool. It's neat that you can get that from, like, it's neat that you can get a part of that from the teaching too, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, my week has been a little bit more, so we chatted earlier in the week because we were doing some tech stuff for this to make sure that I knew how to work all this equipment, which I don't really, but good enough. And yeah, I was last weekend, well, at the time of recording, it was last weekend. I participated in an art show, and it was a 3-day thing, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it was, those shows, I've done quite a few, and they're always it's a lot of prep. It's a lot of time, like you're spending your whole weekend. And for me, I'm definitely more introverted, I would say. So like I mean, I can pretend I'm middle of the road. But these things do, like, they drained me versus, I don't come home from these things thinking like, oh, I've got so much energy. Like, no, it's tiring because you're having small talk and stuff like that. And it's great. It's great for meeting other artists. And like that part is always really nice because, similar to what you were saying, like you connect with other people who are doing similar things, and it does help kind of like light you up a bit. But it was a very slow weekend. There weren't a lot of people, so like I didn't make many sales at all. And it was tough. Like I can typically, like, I've done other shows where the same thing happens and I can weather it a bit better, but for whatever reason, it's like I really needed that weekend to be a win, and it wasn't. And so it was pretty, I'm still feeling a little bit just blah about the outcome. So and that's just kind of like the ups and downs of doing this kind of stuff, right? And it's hard, like when you create something and you put it out there and you have such high hopes and then you don't get the response that you're expecting, like that, it's such a hit, and you have to like, you have just to get back up and keep at it. But it's taking me longer this time to like get back up. And there have been kind of the questions in my head of like, what, like, honestly, what is the point of this? Like it's so much time, it's so much work, it's so much energy. Like, is this actually ever going to go anywhere? So that's like that's the cheerful headspace that I'm in right now.
Delightful.
Yeah. Just all happiness over here.
No, well, I'm really sorry your show didn't go well. It is so frustrating. Like you're saying, you put all this time and energy, and to not get the outcome you were hoping for, it really stings, and it's tough to come back from. I'm curious, have you thought about what it is that's making it harder this time to bounce back from?
Yeah, I think part of it is I had really high expectations because I'd done this show in the past and I did really well. And it was a great, like in the past when I did it, it was such a positive experience for me. It was so exciting. I came back like just like super feeling very proud of myself and feeling like I had something, And so that was kind of what I was expecting. And that's, with other stuff going on with work and stuff like that, I needed that fuel. So it was particularly hard not to get it. It's like I really needed it to be that thing. But ultimately, this is kind of the way it is. Like, you have no control over, and some of these shows are going to be awesome and some of them aren't. And it's hard. It's hard to sit there and you see other artists who are selling quite a lot.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm not the only one who wasn't selling. Like there was other people there, of course, who weren't selling much either. But it's an interesting experience to be like, you're in this room with a bunch of other people also selling like stuff that they've created with their heart and their soul. And you see people buying from that, like, you know, buying from others, but not from you. And it's like, what's wrong with my creation?
Yeah. Oh man, is that ever a recipe for self-doubt?
Well, yeah.
It's the comparison trap.
It's the comparison trap. Exactly. 100%. And it's, yeah, like it's just, there's a lot of self-talk and stuff that you gotta do sometimes. It's hard too, because you don't want to seem like you're discouraged when you're there, right? You need to keep seeming like happy but on the inside you're kind of dying.
Yeah.
A little bit. It'll be fine. Like I know I'll get back to it, but it was just like I really needed it to be something different than what it was.
Yeah.
So it just kind of sucks, but that's okay. That's just also part of the reality.
Yeah, there's a quote, and hopefully I'm getting it right. It's that happiness is expectations minus reality, or something like that. And that's sort of what it made me think of. And there's something I heard recently about, you know, being hopeful versus having like certain expectations about something.
Right.
And I kind of like that idea, because I think we do often have pretty high expectations, especially like when you're putting pressure on one thing. And I mean, I think this is something, you know, musicians certainly experience as well. You know, when you go do a show, it's like, this one has to go well, or like you release a song, this one has to be the one that does it. Yeah. And when those things, you know, fall short, you can end up feeling, you know, pretty bad about yourself and pretty bad about, you know, the future of your art. So I think the idea of like being hopeful that things go well is a really powerful one, versus like having particular expectations. Maybe just having the expectation that whatever happens, you know, you'll be able to bounce back from it, and tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah.
And you know, you can move forward, you know, after some time.
Right. I think there's a couple factors at play here. I think like one of them, like I wasn't in the best headspace going into it either. So I think, because like I had a show back in the fall, and same thing. I didn't sell. I sold one thing to my mom, so I don't really count that as a sale, because it's my mom. She has to support me because she birthed me. But I was, with that show, I was in I was going into it in such a positive frame of mind, and I think I had good energy going into that, and so I was kind of like, I wasn't defining success based on how much I sold. It was like the quality of connections that I made, and the quality of feedback I got from people, and there were quite a few people who were curious about my work, which I always love. I love when people are curious and ask questions. And like, it doesn't have to be for you. And I totally acknowledge that my work isn't for everyone. And that is not only okay, but that is expected. But I love when people ask me questions, and it's great when people compliment, or, you know, when something that I'm doing resonates. And I heard some of that. And so that show was, you know, financially not a success, but I found success in it just through the interactions and stuff. Whereas this one, I was going into it like I was already kind of low energy. There was that sense of desperation, right? And also because it's coming close to the new year, like I had some financial goals with like how much I'd sell over the year that I'm far from reaching. And so there's that kind of like, oh, I've got to make that money. Like, this is my last show before the new year, so I've got to make it at this show. Oh, and so as I'm talking, I'm like, yeah, that probably is a component to why I was particularly disappointed, having not sold much of anything. And it's also, I put a lot of money into this one because I actually got some like cards printed. So like I took scans of my work and got art cards printed, which is an upfront cost. And I was super excited about them. I'm like, oh, these are going to sell. Like, these are definitely going to sell because it's a low ticket item. It's not expensive. But then again, the only ones I sold were to people I knew. And it's like, you know, it ultimately doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that my stuff's good or bad. That was just the show. And again, it wasn't weather-wise. It was really bad on the Sunday, so not many people were coming out, and it was slower on the Friday and the Saturday than it has been in the past. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's always so many factors, and it's so easy to just assume that it's all because of you. It's like, oh, well, it's because my work isn't good enough and people don't like it and whatever, rather than being able to. And I think it's really great that you're able to say, well, here are all the different things at play here. And okay, it kind of makes sense, because I think that ultimately helps to make you more resilient, because I think you have to be when you're an artist and you're sharing your work. Because like you said, the stuff that you make isn't going to be for everybody. You're not going to be for everybody. That's just, the way the ball rolls. And if you can cultivate the kind of mindset that allows you to pick yourself back up and just do it again, I think that's a recipe for, some kind of success.
Right.
Again, I think having, maybe too specific expectations about what success is going to look like can sometimes stunt you, because if those expectations aren't met, then you feel like a failure, when, in reality, you might get to a point that is, quite successful, but it looks a little bit different.
Right. And I mean, in some ways, I kind of think of these as like rites of passage, because I know every artist,
that's true,
artist I talk to, they've all had an experience like this, right? Like they've all had a show where they don't sell anything, or people just walk by and don't even pay attention to their work. That happens to anyone who's putting their work out there publicly. So it feels like crap. But then on the other hand, like there is part of my brain that's like wear it as a badge of honor. Like this was kind of a failure, but like that's part of the game. Like you're in the game.
Yeah.
You're experiencing it. It sucks at times. And then sometimes it's good. Anyways, so, and I think it's also, again, it's just everything else that's happening too around this isn't helping. And this kind of leads well into the topic that we wanted to touch on today, which was like seasonality, which is always something that's top of mind to me, because it took me a long time, and I don't even know if I fully realized it until I was talking to you. I work in phases. Like I go through seasons of creative work and seasons of productivity. And I used to beat myself up so much because I wasn't that person who just every day I'm going to paint for an hour. Every day I'm going to do this thing for half an hour. Like I'm not that person. It's like I'll go through 3 months where I'm painting a ton and then I won't do anything for 6 potentially. Right. And yeah. And so right now I'm in a phase of I'm not doing much painting. I'm not doing much of anything actually in outside of work. But I am kind of beating myself up about it a little bit. So I'm trying to be okay. But anyways, but seasonality, it's always I feel like it kind of ties in.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's something I've been thinking about is deliberate seasonality. I first was made aware of this idea from listening to Cal Newport's podcast. And he talks about sort of the inherent seasonality in being a professor, because he teaches computer science. And so he was talking about, how you have natural periods where it's busier, where you're teaching, and then you have your summers, and, he does his writing and he has all these other things that he does. And so he has different schedules depending on the time of year it is. And that naturally you are going to have these periods where it's busier and periods where it's a little bit more restful. And I just loved the idea of actually choosing to have periods where you're doing more work, and then periods where you're resting after, where you're giving yourself that space to, whether it's that you're, in my case, I might have periods where I'm doing more practicing versus periods where I'm doing more creating. Or I might have periods where I'm doing just more music in general, and then I have periods where I'm doing just less stuff. We're coming up on the holidays. This is a time where I'm having to actively think to myself, okay, well, you've got a couple of weeks where you're going to have some students taking time off. This is a great time to rest, because once the new year starts, it's going to be amping up and it's going to be a crazy, at least for my first couple of months are going to be incredibly busy. And so the idea of strategically planning when you're going to be taking time to
Right.
just allow yourself to just do whatever you have to do. But I was really interested, when we had first started talking about it, I was so interested to hear about, the fact that you just really naturally go through these periods of more creativity versus more, I guess, periods of like intake or rest or rejuvenation.
Or collapse.
And that, or collapse,
Let's be
that's fair
honest.
too. Just emotional, mental, physical collapse. Well, and hopefully, I mean, I think part of what appeals to me about, deliberate seasonality is that for me, it seems like a potential remedy to burnout, because I'm the kind of person who I'm prone to working myself just into dust. And I've done that. And this is part of my struggle for many years, where I felt like my validity and my worthiness came from my insane workload. Like, I'm somebody who gets up early and immediately grinds and does a ton of work, and who needs rest? I'll sleep when I'm dead. Like, I very much had that mentality while I was also exhausted and unhappy and overwhelmed and, often burning out. So I would sort of really grind incredibly hard, and then I'd have a period of like 2 or 3 days where I could do nothing. And so it was just completely unsustainable. And really, I mean, my performance suffered greatly. I wasn't really writing a lot of music at the time too. I would sort of go through little bursts where I would write something, but I was feeling stuck, and I was trying to do more of in the way of the practicing, because I also felt like I just wasn't good enough. Like, I just have to keep practicing because I'm not good enough. So I mean, maybe that's a conversation for another day. But, as I've been trying to untangle a lot of that, I'm very much, thinking in terms of like, what are the things I can do to prevent burnout before it happens? Because when you burn out, it takes so much time to recover, to just get yourself back to functioning like a normal human being, never mind putting yourself in the kind of headspace you need to be in to create, meaningful work you're proud of. I also think burning out is like it's so disrespectful to ourselves. It's like telling yourself like you aren't worthy of the dignity of rest. It's just something that, I think as I've taken rest more seriously, I've experienced the benefits in just my day-to-day life, and in my music, and in my practicing, and in my teaching, and in my relationships, and, all of that. And, I think if we all operated from this place of respecting our natural, flow, how our bodies naturally need to operate, I think we'd all be a lot more satisfied. I think our work would be infinitely more sustainable, and we just wouldn't be hitting these periods of burnout. But I think you really hit on something so critical, where so much of that is about unlearning all of this self-talk that seems to plague us when we are taking time off, where you feel like, oh, well, I'm not doing this and this and this and this, so I'm a failure. Especially if you're then, comparing yourself in your output to somebody else's, and then it's just, it's amplified. It's
a tricky thing. There's there's the unlearning all the messaging that you get, and that kind of like rise and grind culture has been, I think it's being challenged now, but that's all you saw like 5 years ago. I think the pandemic actually helped kind of like force people to reevaluate that whole idea. But the other challenge, like, when you're saying like the intentional seasonality, like, because I don't intentionally like, I'm going to be creative during these months. I just go with where my energy is at in the moment, sort of thing. Right. Because like with intentional seasonality, there needs to be a self-awareness as well, and I don't have that. Right. Like, I think, I don't have that kind of self-awareness. I don't know, like, when do I need those periods of rest and creative rejuvenation? And maybe I can't schedule it in that way. Like, maybe that runs counter.
Right.
But there's probably a balance too, because like I am burnt out, not from art, but from my day job. And of course that bleeds into every other area of your life. Right. So it's tricky for me. Like, that's the other thing that's thrown into the mix that makes it tricky for me to predict like what I need to give myself. Cause it's like my work is unpredictable, sort of thing. Right. Like I don't have control there. And well, I have a level of control, but of course, like, it's work, you don't have as much control. Yeah, so it's tricky, and like it's taken me it's taken me a long time to feel like I think feeling okay with not, I mean, I've never been someone to say like, oh, it's taken me a long time to feel okay about not grinding. I mean, that's such a lie, because I never was that person to do that in the first place.
Right.
That's not part of my nature. Like, I am much more likely to give myself rest than other people, but it's taken me a long time to not feel guilty about those low creative phases.
Yeah.
And to start to really not compare myself to others in that area, because like I know there's like, you know, I follow artists who produce regularly and like just so much, but it's like, don't compare. There's no point comparing yourself to them. They're a different person. They're in a different phase of life, probably. Like a lot of the artists I follow are doing this full time. It's a whole other ball game. You know, if I was doing this full time, yeah, I'd be approaching it in a much different way. I don't know what my point is, other than I guess there's a level of self-awareness that's necessary to work kind of sustainably that I think a lot of us just don't have. Yeah.
So I would be curious as to whether you think it's something that can be cultivated.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it is, but it's just how? Like, what do you? I guess it's listening to conversations like this and thinking, because it is kind of like you said, it's like an unlearning of things that are so deep rooted. And even like I think about this a lot too. Like our education system. Like we came through, like our brains are developed based on the education system we came through. And the education system we came through, like we were rewarded for doing tasks and doing homework and getting good grades. And we were like punished if we didn't do those things, sort of thing. That must have an impact on the way we continue to work into adulthood. And that must have an impact on our ability to say like, no, I'm taking a step back from this right now, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That was never, like, in school, that wasn't something we could do. We can just say, like, yeah, I'm going to take I can't do homework right now. I'm too, like, tired, too stressed out. I'm going to take a step back. Like, no, you had to power through. Or you didn't, but then you were labeled as a, you know, poor student or worse. So it's the level of kind of undoing that we have to go through is, like, it's quite a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think having conversations with others, I think, is so helpful, because sometimes, you know, in trying to be, self-aware, there's just only so much you can do on your own, you know, but being able to talk to somebody else and sort of, you know, maybe sort of see some of yourself reflected in, you know, another person's experiences, I think can be incredibly revealing. I know definitely from our conversations, from conversations I've had with other people, just how much it's revealed to me about myself and little things that I go, oh, that actually sounds like me. That sounds applicable. It sounds like something I hadn't thought of before. For me, definitely journaling is really helpful on that front. I know you and I have talked about journaling a bunch, but I feel like sometimes one of the best ways to understand what's going on in your head is to just get it out on paper and kind of, you know, if you're that way inclined. I know journaling is something that a lot of people struggle to maintain a practice of, but I think even if you were to just do something as simple as tracking like your energy levels on like a scale of 1 to 10, or your impulse to create, and you know, because that would take you, you know, a couple seconds each day just to kind of stop, sort of think about how you're feeling, and then give yourself a rating. You could probably do that for other metrics too, like, you know, how happy do I feel? How clear-minded do I feel? And you just like give yourself sort of a number, and then you sort of at the end of the month maybe track and see how you did. If you do that over the course of a year, you might have some more data that will help you potentially plan a little bit more strategically. If you're, you know, somebody who likes to plan, you know, maybe a year in advance, or, you know, a few months in advance, like I do Cal Newport's quarterly planning or strategic planning. Yeah, and so that might just be something worth exploring, just to see if you can glean any insight. The alternative would, I think, be to just go with the flow more. Yeah. Just if you're feeling like you're hitting a point, just acknowledge it. I think that it requires a lot of self-awareness too, just to be able to say, okay, in this moment, this is how I'm feeling. And to just honor it, I think is like one of the best things you can do for yourself and for your art, to just say, I am just not feeling it right now, and just to disengage completely and give yourself whatever it is you feel like you need to get to where you're feeling better.
Right. And be okay with that. Yeah, it's interesting, the tracking. That's something I've actually been doing with like my energy levels. So like in the morning, like how much, like, you know, like what's my bucket at, sort of thing, right? Like I give it a percentage, and then at the end of the day, it's okay, well, how much did I actually, of my bucket, how much of that did I give? You know, like how much of that is, so, and it's just kind of it's an interesting way for me to kind of just check in on just like my energy flow. Yeah, and like the journaling, we've talked about this before. You know, I'm one of those people, I love journals. Like I love buying them. They're so pretty, and it's always like I get a new one. It always feels like this is gonna be like the new start. This is gonna be the answer to my problem. And then I'll write in it for like maybe a month or two, and then I abandon it. So I have all these journals that are like, and I can't pick up from where I left off. I have to buy a new journal. Like it's just, you know. But I've learned that with journaling, it's not my thing. But talking, I feel like talking and having someone to bounce ideas off of is really helpful. And I think this is the other thing, because we've touched on this before, like the importance of, because you and I are going to, like throughout this podcast, are going to be sharing all sorts of things that we do that work or don't work or whatever. But the importance of people taking and using what makes sense to them, what works for them, and leaving the rest. Because I think there's a whole industry around giving people the solution to their problem. Like, here's this book, and we're going to lay out everything you need to do to fix yourself. And the reality is that's just not true. It's a lie. There isn't just one solution, because everyone's different. You're going to need to use a bunch of different tools from a bunch of different places. And because I think in the past, I would try something like some sort of therapeutic technique or whatever, and then feel bad that, like, okay, an example is I went through a creative slump, and so I started doing like a painting a day, and I was going to do that for the whole year, which was probably too ambitious, because I gave up after 2 months and I felt like crap about it.
Right.
But now it's like, I've learned that it's okay if those tools that work for someone else don't work for you. Like, that's totally fine. Just don't beat yourself up about it, because I'd beat myself up about it. I feel like a failure and feel guilty that I, like, you know, once again, didn't follow through. So that's kind of some unlearning that I'm doing. It's just like, you're allowed to try things and not continue doing them. And that is 100% okay.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's actually essential. So I think you're exactly right that there's no one size fits all solution, that everybody has to figure out what works for them. But I think the only way to do that is to have data that you can draw from to be able to say, yes, this works, or no, this doesn't work, or this works under these conditions. So if instead of looking at those experiments as, you know, a failure, you just look at it as information.
Right.
It's like, well, I've learned something new about myself, which is going to help you get to the next thing. And it'll maybe help you even narrow down to find the next likely, you know, experiment for you to try. And then from there, you get to craft the life that you want, because we're also not just thinking in terms of, you know, how can I optimize my output? You're also thinking about, how do I create a life that I enjoy living? And for some people, they don't necessarily want to engage in creating every single day. It's something that, you know, beyond what they're able to produce, it's just more a sense of like, I just want to kind of do this when I feel called to. And some people like me, where I have a practice where I do something musical every day. That's sort of my like main metric I track, is I have to do something musical every single day. And it's going to look different depending on what I have going on. Often that's practice or writing a song. You know, sometimes it's, you know, 10 or 15 minutes if that's all I have. And for me, that just seems to work. I like having that connection with music every day. But you know, for a lot of people, that's just not the case. It's not, I mean, I'm also really fortunate in that with music, there are so many options. So I might have a day where I just feel like I don't have the bandwidth to have a really good, high quality practice session, but I feel like I could like create for 2 or 3 hours. Like I can just sit there and just make something. And so that's what I'll do. So, you know, my week is pretty heavily structured, but during the time, maybe some like downtime on a weekend, or if I have a period that I'm like through the holidays where it's a little bit looser, a little bit more open, I'll do a lot more of that where I'm just kind of feeling my way through it. But yeah, it's so important to know who you are, to know what works for you, and then to be okay with the fact that it is going to be totally different than a lot of people's experience, and feeling confident enough in yourself to not let it get to you and not do that comparison game.
Yeah.
Because it is just a recipe for frustration. And, at the end of the day, if you're happy with your existence and with the art you're creating, I think that's really what matters.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really tricky, especially like in the position I'm in, where it's like I'm wanting to build this into something more. I'm not quite sure what. Like, I don't know if is this something I want to build into a full-time thing? Like, I don't know. I haven't figured that piece out yet. But it means that I'm looking to other artists who have accomplished it, and which isn't a bad thing, but it becomes tricky because I'm the type of person, I think, and not everyone is like this, but for me, I am looking for answers. But what unfortunately, my tendency is to kind of prioritize the answers that other people give versus the answers that I give myself. And so what ends up happening is I hear a message, like, because there's lots of artists who have accomplished, this is what they do. Like, they sell their art or they sell workshops or whatever. And they also, so there's a couple of artists that I follow that like help other artists build their career. But the issue is that, they have kind of a definition of what you need to do. They have an idea of what you need to do to get to where you want to be based on what they did. But that's all based on them and their personality. And so like you're saying like some people just want to create when they feel inspired, right? I've heard from other artists, like, you can't do that. Like, you have to, you can't just show up when you feel inspired, because then you won't paint enough. You've got to show up more than that. And it's those sorts of messages, those like the shoulds, the shouldn'ts, the cans, the can'ts, they can really mess with you, and they can really derail that kind of journey to finding your ideal way of creating and living and being. And so that's one of the, I always kind of think about that. I always have to kind of caution myself, and hopefully this podcast caution other people, like, there is no right or wrong way, but people will tell you there is. And I just fundamentally don't believe that. I don't agree with it. There's just, I think you can make anything work it might just take a little bit of creative thinking, but you can make anything work for yourself.
I think that's also where it comes down to managing expectations.
Right.
Because if you are somebody who does want to just create when you feel the inspiration to, then there has to be a recognition that, in terms of the quantity of what you produce, it's just not going to be as high. Right. But if that's okay for you, if you're happy with that, I think that's great. You should just do that, and definitely not feel pressured to go against what feels right for you just to produce more if that's not what you want to do.
But even within that, because I'm essentially someone who just paints when they're inspired, really, like, because I have those seasons of heightened kind of creative output.
Right.
I don't push myself through periods of low inspiration. So my output might be less than someone who's consistently painting, but that doesn't mean you can't build an art business. It just means that,
of course,
your business might look different. Your business might be like, you sell some paintings, but the bulk of your income is actually coming from teaching or from selling prints, or sure. So that's what I mean. Like, there's no right way, there's no wrong way. It's just finding, and I think you can achieve what you want to achieve, but it might just look, your path there might be a bit different, might look different than what you were expecting.
100%.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you 100%. Yeah, and that's where it's recognizing that you have your own journey and that nobody can take it for you, and if somebody wants to, offer you advice based on their experience, I think there is definitely a lot to be gained from other people's experience. I get so many ideas from people I listen to, other musicians. So I love looking to other people for inspiration, but I'm at a point where I feel very content in being on the path I'm on. And it's made all the difference in just the sort of maybe not confidence, but just like this comfort in just like being where I am and doing the things I'm doing, and just knowing that, you know, day by day I'll just get a little bit closer and a little bit closer, and to just find the validation in the fact that I'm living my life the way that I want to, and I'm making music the way I want to. Because yeah, as you were talking about, you know, maybe being an artist who produces fewer works but then is doing teaching or something on the side, that's very much like the place I'm in, where, you know, I write my own music and I'd like to be getting to a point where I can put my music out there and potentially, you know, bring in some income from it, but it's not the bulk of what I do. And so I'm just never going to be as prolific as somebody who makes that their like one thing. Right. But that's also, I'm okay with that because I love the education side of things so much. And I, you know, every time you decide to put your attention into something, there's some kind of a trade-off. And as long as it works for you, as long as at the end of the day it all balances out for you, for what you want, and for the life and the career and the artistic journey you're trying to create, I think there's just so much satisfaction in that.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Did we have any final thoughts on seasonality?
I feel like we didn't even talk much about seasonality. We talked like around it. I feel like that's probably the way these conversations are going to go.
That could be.
Which is totally fine. No, I do like that as a concept though. Like, you know, it has helped sort of take the pressure off of me, and also just kind of made me feel normal, because again, like the artists that I follow, what I see, because of course what we see is what's on social media, and so what you see is consistent creating, consistent output, and which isn't probably true, like that, you know, like they're artists share strategically, right? So well, everyone does. Anyone who's marketing on social media, it's marketing, so you're painting a picture that's not actually reality. But like this concept of seasonality has made me feel normal, whereas before I kind of felt like I must not be a real artist because I don't paint all the time. Like I had that limiting belief for a really long time. So it's comforting. It's comforting to kind of come across these concepts. It's like, oh no, that sounds like me. And I guess I can still consider myself an artist even though I'm not painting every single day. I just follow a different kind of process or whatever. Yeah,
I think it's really important to be able to zoom out and just look on a broader time scale, because I think we do get wrapped up in day to day. Like, how productive can I be today? Let's, you know, get every ounce of value out of every minute of today possible. But if we can zoom out and look at what we're able to do over a longer time period, it just puts everything in perspective.
Right.
Because we're not looking at what did I do today? We're looking at what did I do over the last 5 years? And if, you know, your output is something you're really satisfied with, if you're really proud of what you put out in that time, I think that's totally different. And it also then allows for you to have those periods where you're just not doing as much. Because, you know, it's also really essential, I think, to being able to create to the best of your ability. Eventually that creative well is going to drain. You know, you can't just keep going and going and going forever. You know, I will say there's something to be said, like for me, in doing something creative just about every day, I feel like creating kind of fills up my creative well, but I definitely go through periods where I'm not doing as much creating, where I feel like I need a little bit of time to just listen to some new things and learn some new things. So I can definitely create on a dime, but it's not the output's not always going to be great. It's not always going to be inspired in terms of how it sounds. But because I'm thinking more over the course of like a year what I'm able to produce, if I can produce like 10 to 12 songs I'm really happy with, like that feels like a win for me.
Right.
You know, I don't have to write a new song every day. And our performance is just so much better when we can give ourselves periods of rest and also just periods of being able to take in new sources of inspiration, because, you know, the art we create is influenced by everything, by the stuff we listen to, by the stuff we watch, by the stuff we read, by the art we consume, visually or what have you. And if you're constantly just, it's like trying to exercise and never eating. Like, your body's going to give up on you. Like, you need that fuel. And for artists, we get that fuel from our rest and from our ability to connect with the output of other artists.
Yeah. It's interesting when you said, like, being creative can fill your creative well. Because I just realized for me, that's not the case, which is really interesting.
That's so interesting.
It is, like, and for me, like, when I'm not creating, I actually dig more into, like, the right side of the brain type activities.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that, like, Notion, for instance, like, I'll just go and play on Notion sometimes when it's like, and I guess there's an element of creativity there, but it's like when I'm not creating, I'm actually getting organized. Like, that's sort of, and that's the thing that actually refills, which is really strange. It's like the sides of my brain, like, trade off.
Right. Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, because I feel like I operate from both places all the time. Like, I'm hyper organized in how I structure my time and structure my days, but within those little blocks of music time, it's like chaos.
Right.
It's just like creative chaos. So yeah, so interesting how it's like you have like seasons of creativity and seasons of,
yes,
I guess, like organization, I guess being more detail oriented, maybe more a little bit into those sorts of things like Notion and all of that. And I'm curious then, after those periods where you've taken that time to maybe get more organized, how do you feel like your art is impacted when you do return to creating? Do you feel like you come back feeling more refreshed, feeling more, clarity when you sit down to paint something?
It's a good question. I don't know. I don't think so, but I think what happens with me is, like, because I've started working in series too, right? And so if there's not a long enough gap between the series, I think what happens is I start to paint and I'm kind of holding on to the concept that was originally like that was driving that old series, and it's like hard to kind of let go. So I think like that kind of letting my brain dig into the organization, it's like a brain reset, so that now I'm coming like, it's like the past is in the past. I'm coming with kind of fresh ideas, fresh way forward. Like, I'm not trying to hold on to something that I was creating before. I think, but I'm not really sure, because this is all kind of like, this level of self-awareness in terms of my creativity and my creative flow is all pretty new to me too. So I'm still kind of trying to figure it out.
Okay.
Because like right now I'm like, I work in series right now, but that might not actually be the case forever. I don't know. It's just kind of what's working for me at the moment. Ask me again in 5 years.
Will do. I'll set a calendar reminder.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what I'm doing at that point. But
yeah,
I don't know. And it might just be like, because like the art that I do right now in particular, it's very abstract. Like you had mentioned it. You're like, you're kind of like improvising. It's like, that's exactly it. Like, the medium does its own thing, and I'm kind of like improvising according to what the medium's doing. So there's very little control that I have. And so I think that might be part of it too. It's like, I kind of just like, I just completely let myself lean into that complete lack of control for like for however long I'm kind of working on that series of work. And then I want to go back to the area of being controlled, like having control, right? So then I go back into those kind of activities, like organizing and stuff like that, where it's like I can kind of like regain control of things. So that might be part of it as well. I can't just live in chaos. I can't just live in this kind of like, I need to, I need to be in that state of like just giving up control while I'm creating that work. But then I need to return back to a state of being organized and having control before I can go back to that state,
Right.
So that might be kind of part of why I'm sort of flip-flopping between the two as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you do the same thing I do, but just on a bigger time scale. Because I keep myself organized, like very organized within my days, and then create within those boundaries. But for you, it sounds like it's more, longer period of chaotic creativity, then sort of reset, clean up, and then the whole cycle starts again. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a quote I'm not going to get it exactly right, but it's something like, for us to be ordinary within our lives so that we can be violent and original in our work. So I'm maybe that's something we can talk about at another point, the sort of relationship between organization and creativity.
Right.
And how they work together or don't, I guess, for some people. Yeah. It might not, but anyways, yeah, that's really cool. Also, I think this is where our mediums diverge as well, because for me, if I am having a period where maybe I feel like I've completely drained my creative well, my songwriting well, which has definitely happened. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm writing for my full-length debut album. I've been writing for this album for a few years to some degree or another, and I'll stop to work on something else. But I've definitely had periods where I haven't been working on it because I just feel like I'm not sure where else to go with it. But I'm really fortunate that I'm able to fall back always on practicing.
Right.
So I always have something else I can be doing that's musical that makes me feel like, well, I'm still engaging with music, even if it's not doing the thing that then creates the output. I'm able to hone my craft so that I can, ideally create with a little bit more ease the next time I feel like I'm ready to start really making something again. So yeah, I guess that's also sort of coming into play here.
There could be those opportunities for me. Because, I think of, your practicing is probably similar to, how some artists do, sketchbooks and stuff like that, right? Whereas I just don't have that as part of my routine. But it's interesting that you bring that up, because one of the things I've, I haven't had a lot of energy for creating, but one thing I'm thinking of kind of digging back into in the new year is doing some more representational stuff again, which to me it's a more controlled way of creating, right? Because again, with my abstracts, I'm completely giving up control, whereas with the representational, I'm actually trying to I'm not letting I'm trying specifically to make something look like something. So it's control is part of the game on that one. And so it is interesting, it makes sense then that I am I'm in this phase of kind of wanting to be organized and be on top of things. So it makes sense that that's kind of where my creative instinct is leading me right now, is to kind of go back to the representational stuff for a little while. Mm-hmm. So there is ways, I think, of there are ways of bringing that in, but I also think I'm just kind of lazy.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that. I think that might again come down to just you having a good instinct for what works for you, because certainly not every musician practices the way I do. You'll quite famously have musicians who will say I just don't practice. In reality, they do. It's just, I think sometimes the definition of practice is too narrow. It's more about, in my opinion, the intention behind what you're doing. Right. So I think that exactly fits. It is doing this very or more structured sort of approach to creating is a form of practice, right? Because there is an element of having an outcome that you want. So you're trying to make this thing look like this thing, and either you succeed or you don't. And then you can kind of gauge what you have to do to close that gap, which is very much like practicing. If I'm trying to practice a song, I know what it's supposed to sound like, and if what I'm doing doesn't sound the way that I know it's supposed to, I can stop and I can go, well, what do I have to adjust to make it sound more like what my intention is? So yeah, I guess that is definitely, you can have practice in anything. Yeah. If you broaden that definition enough.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I think that's a good place to leave it.
I think I've exhausted my thoughts.
I think our season of speaking about seasonality is come to a close.
For now. It'll repeat.
Time to usher in. It'll. I'm sure it'll come back. It's time to usher in a new season of rest for the remainder of this Sunday.
Yes. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for listening.
You're welcome.
And you have no choice. I'm holding you captive here. You have to listen to my every word. There will be a quiz after.
Yes.
So I hope you've prepared.
I look
I
forward
hope you've
to
taken copious notes. This is definitely going to count towards your final grade.
Excellent.
All right. We will see you all in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.